First contact fiasco. The vast expanse of space surrounding Diplomatic Station Epsilon 9 had always been a serene canvas of twinkling stars and distant nebulae. That is, until today. Ambassador Zixlor of the Galactic Confederation stood frozen, all 6 of his eyes fixed on the viewscreen before him. His antennae twitched nervously as he watched the impossible unfold. "What in the name of the 7 moons is that?" he muttered, his normally melodious voice cracking with disbelief. The object hurtling towards the station defied description. It was clearly a spacecraft, but unlike any Zixlor had ever encountered in his centuries of diplomatic service. The vessel appeared to be cobbled together from mismatched parts, its hull a patchwork of metals and polymers. Bursts of flames erupted sporadically from what he assumed were propulsion units, leaving a trail of multicolored exhaust in its wake. "Ambassador," the station's AI chimed in, its tone eerily calm given the circumstances. "The approaching vessel does not match any known configurations in our database. However, it appears to be of human origin." Zixlor's exoskeleton paled. "Humans? Impossible. They haven't even mastered faster-than-light travel yet. How could they possibly?" His words were cut short as the human ship careened past the station's defensive perimeter, narrowly avoiding a collision with a departing Vexillian transport. Alarms blared throughout Epsilon 9 as the station's automated systems attempted to make sense of the chaos. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," the AI announced. Zixlor straightened his ceremonial robes and took a deep breath. "Very well. Let's hear what they have to say." The viewscreen flickered to life, revealing the interior of the human ship. Zixlor's mandibles dropped open in shock. The beings before him were even stranger than their vessel. They appeared to be bipedal, with exposed skin in various shades of pink and brown. Atop their heads sat tufts of colorful filaments, and their faces sported an assortment of decorative markings and metal protrusions. "Yo, alien dudes," one of the humans shouted, waving enthusiastically. "We come in peace and all that jazz. Got any spare parking?" Zixlor blinked rapidly, his universal translator struggling to process the unfamiliar idioms. "I'd welcome you to Diplomatic Station Epsilon 9, he managed to reply. "However, I must inform you that unscheduled arrivals are strictly prohibited. Perhaps we could arrange a formal—" "Aw, come on, man," another human interjected. "We've come like a bazillion light years to party with you guys. Don't be such a buzzkill." The ambassador's antennae drooped in confusion. "Party? Buzzkill? I'm afraid I don't understand. This is a serious diplomatic." His words were drowned out by a sudden burst of rhythmic sounds emanating from the human ship. The beings on screen began moving in strange, jerky motions that Zixlor could only assume were some form of seizure. "That's what I'm talking about," the first human yelled over the cacophony. "Let's get this space party started." Before Zixlor could formulate a response, the viewscreen went dark. Moments later, the entire station shuddered as the human vessel made contact with the docking bay. "Alert," the AI intoned. "Unauthorized docking in progress. Security protocols have been overridden." Zixlor's exoskeleton now felt 2 sizes too small. How had these primitives managed to bypass the station's advanced security measures? And more importantly, what chaos would they bring to the delicate balance of interstellar diplomacy? As if in answer to his unspoken question, the station's internal sensors detected multiple human life signs spreading throughout the lower levels. Reports began flooding in from bewildered alien diplomats and station personnel. "Ambassador," a frantic Zorlak representative called. "The humans are in the Arboretum. And they're eating the decorative foliage." "Sir," a security officer chimed in, "we've got reports of humans in the zero-gravity recreation area. They appear to be engaging in some sort of acrobatic competition." Zixlor felt a headache building behind his compound eyes. "Contain them," he ordered. "Use non-lethal methods only. We can't risk an interstellar incident." As the ambassador hurried towards the turbolift, Intent on confronting these interlopers personally, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy as he knew it was about to change forever. The doors of the turbolift hissed open, and Zixlor stepped out into utter bedlam. The main promenade of Epsilon 9, usually a model of decorum and interspecies cooperation, had been transformed into what he could only describe as a cosmic circus. A group of humans had commandeered the central fountain, turning it into an impromptu slip and slide, as they called it. Nearby, another human was attempting to teach a very confused Graxlonian the intricacies of a game called rock, paper, scissors. The Graxlonian, possessing neither hands nor any concept of earth minerals or stationery, was growing increasingly agitated. "Ambassador Zixlor," a voice called out. He turned to see Clicksat, his arthropodian assistant, scuttling towards him in a state of near panic. "Thank the stars you're here. We're completely overwhelmed. The humans, they're everywhere." As if to emphasize the point, a human zipped past them on what appeared to be a hoverboard cobbled together from station equipment. The rider let out a whoop of joy before crashing spectacularly into a display of rare Venusian crystal sculptures. Zixlor winced. "Have we managed to identify their leader? Perhaps we can negotiate." His words were cut short as a resounding boom echoed through the station, followed by a flash of multicolored light. Alarms began to blare anew. "What now?" Zixlor groaned. Clicksat's antennae drooped. "It appears the humans have discovered the antimatter research lab. They're throwing what they call a rave in there." The ambassador's exoskeleton nearly cracked from the stress. A rave. In an antimatter lab. These humans were either the bravest or the most foolish species he'd ever encountered. Possibly both. "Right," Zixlor said, straightening his posture. "I'm going in there. We need to establish some semblance of order before." A loud crash interrupted him, followed by the unmistakable sound of an escape pod being jettisoned. Moments later, the station's AI spoke up. "Alert. Unauthorized launch detected. Escape pod 17 has been deployed. Current trajectory: Earth's moon." Zixlor's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Oh, for the love off. Clicksat, send a recovery team after that pod. The last thing we need is human technology scattered across their solar system." As he made his way towards the antimatter lab, pushing through throngs of confused aliens and exuberant humans, Zixlor couldn't help but marvel at the sheer audacity of these beings. They had no grasp of galactic protocol, no apparent fear of the unknown, and a penchant for turning everything they touched into barely controlled chaos. The doors to the lab slid open, releasing a wave of pulsating lights and sounds that Zixlor felt in every molecule of his being. Inside, dozens of humans were gyrating to the rhythmic beats, their movements sending ripples through the carefully calibrated antimatter containment fields. "Excuse me," Zixlor shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. "I must insist that you cease this activity immediately. You're endangering the entire station." A human with bright blue hair and more piercings than Zixlor could count turned to face him. "Whoa, check it out. A real-life alien." She reached out and poked one of Zixlor's antennae, sending a shock through his system. "Dude, you've got to try this sick beat. It's like totally in tune with the quantum fluctuations." Before Zixlor could protest, he found himself pulled into the throng of dancing humans. To his horror and amazement, he realized the human was right. The pulsations of their music were somehow harmonizing with the antimatter containment fields, creating a stability that defied all known laws of physics. As he stood there, caught between panic and wonder, Zixlor had an epiphany. These humans, in all their chaotic glory, possessed a unique ability to adapt, to find solutions where none should exist. They were reckless, yes, but also innovative in ways that could reshape the galaxy. The question now was, could the galaxy survive their arrival? As the impromptu party raged on around him, Ambassador Zixlor realized that his job had just become infinitely more complicated. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The human ambassador. The days following the unexpected human arrival had been a whirlwind of activity on diplomatic station Epsilon 9. Ambassador Zixlor had barely slept, spending every waking moment attempting to contain the chaos unleashed by their uninvited guests, while simultaneously preparing for the arrival of an official human diplomatic envoy. As Zixlor stood in the newly repaired docking bay, surrounded by a delegation of nervous alien representatives, he couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. The sleek diplomatic vessel approaching the station was a far cry from the ramshackle ship that had brought the first humans. At least that was a good sign, wasn't it? "Ambassador," the station's eye chimed in. "The human diplomatic ship is requesting permission to dock." Zixlor took a deep breath, his antennae twitching slightly. "Permission granted. Let's hope this goes better than last time." The ship glided smoothly into the docking bay, its polished hull reflecting the station's lights. As the airlock cycled, Zixlor straightened his posture and prepared to greet the human ambassador with all the pomp and ceremony befitting such an occasion. The airlock doors hissed open, and out stepped a human wearing what appeared to be a garishly colored shirt covered in small, repetitive images of terrestrial flora. Zixlor's compound eyes widened in disbelief. "Aloha, my extraterrestrial amigos," the human exclaimed, grinning widely. "Ambassador Jake Thompson, at your service. But you can call me Jake. Love what you've done with the place." Zixlor's mandibles clicked in confusion. "I'd welcome you, Ambassador Thompson. We are honored by your presence and look forward to establishing formal diplomatic relations between humanity and the Galactic Confederation." Jake's grin widened even further, if that was possible. "Formal? Oh, come on, no need for all that stuffy stuff. I brought board games. Ever played Monopoly? It's a great way to understand Earth economics." The alien delegation exchanged bewildered glances. Zixlor felt a familiar headache building. "Perhaps we could begin with a formal meeting in the conference room. There are many important matters to discuss." Sure. Jake nodded, already distracted by the various alien species around him. "Hey, you with the tentacles. High five. Air, high tentacle." As they made their way to the conference room, Zixlor couldn't shake the feeling that this official meeting would be just as chaotic as the first human encounter. He wasn't wrong. The conference room, usually a place of serious deliberation and careful negotiation, had been transformed. Jake had insisted on rearranging the furniture into what he called a more chill setup. The formal seating was now arranged in a circle, with Earth snacks scattered across the table. "All right, folks," Jake began, popping open a can of something called soda. "Let's get down to business. First order of the day, cultural exchange. Who wants to try a Twinkie?" Zixlor cleared his throat. "Ambassador Thompson, while we appreciate your enthusiasm, there are pressing matters to discuss. The unauthorized arrival of human civilians on this station has caused significant disruption. We need to establish protocols for future interactions." Jake nodded sagely, then proceeded to balance a pencil on his upper lip. "I hear you, Zix, my man. But here's the thing. Humans are explorers, adventurers. You can't expect us to sit around waiting for an invitation when there's a whole galaxy out there. Tell you what, how about we set up an exchange program? You send some of your folks to Earth, we'll send some humans here. Cultural immersion, yeah." The Zorlak representative, still traumatized from the Arboretum incident, chittered nervously. "But the humans eat everything. Our sacred flora." "Ah, don't worry about that," Jake waved dismissively. "We'll pack plenty of snacks. Now, who's up for a quick game of charades to break the ice?" Before anyone could object, Jake was on his feet, gesticulating wildly in what Zixlor could only assume was an imitation of some Earth creature. The other diplomats watched in stunned silence. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that human diplomacy was unlike anything the Galactic Confederation had ever encountered. Jake's approach was a baffling mix of informality, pop culture references, and seemingly random tangents that somehow circled back to important points. "So, about that antimatter containment issue," Jake said, "building a house of cards with some official documents. Turns out our DJs accidentally stumbled onto a breakthrough in quantum harmonics. Who knew, right? We're thinking of patenting the rave stabilization technique. Could revolutionize space travel." Zixlor blinked rapidly, trying to process this information. "You mean to say that the reckless behavior of your civilians led to a scientific discovery?" Jake beamed. "That's humanity for you. Chaotic good, as we like to say. Speaking of which, has anyone here ever played Dungeons and Dragons? Great team-building exercise." As the hours wore on, Zixlor found himself oscillating between frustration and fascination. The human approach to diplomacy was unorthodox, to say the least, but there was an undeniable effectiveness to it. Somehow, between rounds of truth or dare and impromptu dance lessons, actual progress was being made. The first event was the 100-meter dash, a simple concept complicated by the fact that not all species used meters or even understood the concept of running. The Gaetians simply floated to the finish line, while the silicoids rolled like sentient boulders. The human representative, to everyone's shock, won by a significant margin. "How is this possible?" a Prismarian diplomat asked Zixlor, its crystalline body refracting light in patterns of confusion. "Humans have no natural advantages, no extra limbs, no enhanced senses, no ability to manipulate fundamental forces." Zixlor, who had been wondering the same thing, could only shrug. "Perhaps their chaotic nature gives them an edge we don't understand." As the games progressed, it became clear that while humans weren't always the strongest, fastest, or most agile, they had an uncanny ability to adapt to any situation. In the zero-gravity obstacle course, they used their own clothes as makeshift propulsion devices. During the multi-dimensional chess tournament, they introduced a variant they called speed chess, turning a game of careful strategy into a frenzy of quick thinking and reflexes. But it wasn't just their performance in the events that was turning heads. The humans had a knack for turning every competition into a celebration. They cheered not just for their own athletes, but for everyone. They introduced the concept of tailgating to bewildered alien spectators, setting up impromptu barbecues and dance parties between events. "I don't understand," a Zorlak diplomat chittered to Zixlor as they watched a human console the dejected Blobbin after a particularly challenging event. "They compete with such intensity, yet they show kindness to their rivals. How can they reconcile these opposing behaviors?" Zixlor, who had been observing human behavior closely, attempted an explanation. "I believe it's part of what they call sportsmanship. The competition itself is important to them, but so is the spirit in which it's conducted." As the games entered their final day, an unexpected crisis arose. The silicoids and the Gaetians, who had been eyeing each other suspiciously throughout the competition, finally came to blows over a disputed call in the interspecies relay race. Within moments, the arena had devolved into a chaotic brawl, with various species taking sides or trying to flee the conflict. Zixlor felt his exoskeleton constrict with panic. This was exactly the kind of interstellar incident he had feared. As he prepared to call for security, he felt a hand on his shoulder. "I got this, Zix," Jake said with a wink. Before Zixlor could protest, the human ambassador had grabbed a microphone and climbed atop a nearby hoverpod. "Hey, everyone." Jake's voice boomed through the arena. "You know what this situation calls for. A dance-off." The fighting paused as confusion rippled through the crowd. Jake, seizing the moment, began to move in a way that Zixlor could only describe as rhythmically spasmodic. "This is called the robot," Jake announced. "Now you try." To Zixlor's utter amazement, the tensions in the room began to dissipate. Curiosity overcame anger as various species attempted to mimic Jake's movements. Soon, the arena had transformed from a battlefield into the galaxy's most diverse dance floor. As Zixlor watched a silicoid attempt to moonwalk, While a Gatian tried to floss, he felt a profound shift in his understanding of humanity. These beings, with their boundless enthusiasm and adaptability, had turned a potential diplomatic disaster into a moment of universal connection. The Galactic Games concluded not with a medal ceremony, but with an impromptu dance party that lasted well into the station's night cycle. As the festivities wound down, Zixlor found Jake at the makeshift DJ booth, looking tired but triumphant. "So," Jake grinned, "same time next year." Zixlor, surprising even himself, found that he was nodding in agreement. "I believe that would be most illuminating." As he looked out over the arena, where humans and aliens alike were teaching each other their native dances, Zixlor realized that the galaxy had indeed changed. The humans had brought chaos, yes, but also joy, adaptability, and a new way of bridging the gaps between vastly different cultures. The Galactic Games had been more than just a sporting event. They were a glimpse into a future where the diversity of the universe was not just tolerated, but celebrated. And humanity, in all its chaotic glory, was leading the way. Crisis and cooperation. The aftermath of the Galactic Games had left Diplomatic Station Epsilon 9 in a state of exhausted euphoria. Alien diplomats who had once eyed each other with suspicion were now exchanging contact information and planning cultural exchanges. The station's maintenance crews were working overtime to clean up the aftermath of what Jake had dubbed the best party this side of the Andromeda. Zixlor, despite his initial misgivings, found himself feeling cautiously optimistic about the future of intergalactic relations. That is, until the alarms started blaring. Warning, the station's AI announced, its usually calm voice tinged with urgency. Unknown anomaly detected in Sector 7G. All personnel, please report to emergency stations. Zixlor's antennae went rigid with alarm. Sector 7G housed the station's main power core. If something were to go wrong there, "Yo, Zix," Jake's voice crackled over the comm. "What's with the light show? Is this another human-inspired rave?" "I'm afraid not, Ambassador," Zixlor replied, already moving swiftly towards the command center. "We have a situation." By the time Zixlor reached the command center, it was a hive of frantic activity. Screens displayed a swirling mass of energy near the power core, growing larger by the second. "Report," Zixlor demanded. A Vixilian technician looked up from her console, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with stress. "It appears to be some sort of spatial anomaly, Ambassador. It's interfering with the power core's containment field. If we can't stabilize it soon." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew that a breach in the power core would spell disaster not just for the station, but for half the sector. Jake burst into the room, still wearing his pajamas adorned with cartoon Earth animals. "All right, gang, what's the sitch?" As Zixlor quickly briefed him on the situation, Jake's usual joviality faded, replaced by a look of intense concentration that Zixlor had never seen before. "Okay," Jake said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "We've got a mysterious space anomaly threatening to blow us all to Kingdom Come. Sounds like a Tuesday back on Earth. What do we know about this thing?" The Vixilian technician blinked in confusion. "It's Tuesday." Figure of speech, Jake waved dismissively. "Focus, people. What have we tried so far?" As the station's top minds debated potential solutions, each more desperate than the last, Zixlor noticed something odd. The humans who had stayed after the Galactic Games weren't panicking. Instead, they were huddled together, talking excitedly. And was that a whiteboard they were writing on? "Ambassador Thompson," Zixlor interrupted the ongoing debate. "What are your people doing?" Jake grinned, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "What humans do best, my alien amigo. We're brainstorming, and I think we might have something crazy enough to work." What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox crisis response in the history of the Galactic Confederation. The humans, drawing on a mishmash of scientific knowledge, pop culture references, and what they called good old-fashioned American ingenuity, proposed a solution that made Zixlor's exoskeleton crawl with its audacity. "Let me get this straight," Zixlor said, his voice strained. "You want to create a feedback loop using the station's deflector array, amplify it with the power from the core itself, and then use that to punch the anomaly in the face." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Basically, yeah. It's like in that old Earth movie, Ghostbusters. Sometimes, to beat the big bad, you gotta cross the streams." The alien scientists in the room were aghast. "But the risks," one began, "are less than the risk of doing nothing," Jake finished. "Look, I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes crazy is exactly what you need." Zixlor looked around the room, seeing the fear and uncertainty in the eyes, or equivalent sensory organs, of his fellow aliens. Then he looked at the humans, their faces set with determination, and that uniquely human blend of terror and excitement. "Very well," Zixlor said, making a decision that he hoped wouldn't be his last. "Let's cross the streams." What followed was a flurry of activity that Zixlor could only describe as organized chaos. Humans and aliens worked side by side, repurposing equipment, rerouting power, and doing things with the station's systems that their designers had likely never imagined. As the anomaly grew to terrifying proportions, threatening to engulf the entire station, Jake stood at the makeshift control panel they had cobbled together. "All right, folks," he announced, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "Hold on to your butts." With a dramatic flourish, Jake pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound that defied description, a beam of energy erupted from the station, colliding with the anomaly in a spectacular display of light and power. The entire station shook violently. Zixlor felt his internal organs shift in ways they were never meant to. For several heart-stopping moments, it seemed as though the humans' crazy plan had only made things worse. And then, miraculously, the anomaly began to shrink. Slowly at first, then faster, collapsing in on itself until, with a final flash of light, it winked out of existence. A stunned silence fell over the command center, broken only by the beeping of consoles and the heavy breathing of stressed beings. Did that actually work?" someone finally asked. Jake, his hair standing on end from the energy discharge, let out a whoop of joy. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted alien life forms, that's how we do it on Earth." As the realization of their narrow escape sank in, the command center erupted in cheers, tentacles, appendages, and hands raised in celebration. Zixlor found himself swept up in the moment, allowing a very unambassadorial chirp of relief to escape his mandibles. In the days that followed, as the station returned to some semblance of normalcy, Zixlor found himself reflecting on the events that had transpired. The humans, with their chaotic approach and seemingly illogical solutions, had saved them all. More than that, they had brought together beings from across the galaxy in a moment of crisis, fostering cooperation in a way that centuries of formal diplomacy had failed to achieve. As he watched humans and aliens working together to repair the damage caused by their unorthodox solution, sharing jokes and stories as they did so, Zixlor realized that the galaxy had irrevocably changed. The humans, with all their contradictions and complexities, had become an integral part of the cosmic community. The future, Zixlor mused, would certainly be interesting. And for the first time since the humans had crashed into his orderly life, he found himself looking forward to it with genuine excitement. A new galactic era. In the weeks following the spatial anomaly crisis, Diplomatic Station Epsilon 9 hummed with an energy unlike anything it had experienced in its centuries-long history. The near disaster had catalyzed a transformation that went far beyond simple repairs and system upgrades. Zixlor stood at his favorite viewport, gazing out at the star-studded expanse. Behind him, the station bustled with activity. Humans and aliens moved about in a harmonious chaos that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. "Penny for your thoughts, Zix, old buddy." The ambassador turned to find Jake approaching, carrying 2 steaming mugs of what humans called coffee, a beverage that had quickly become popular among many species, much to the chagrin of the station's medical staff. "I was just reflecting on how much has changed," Zixlor replied, accepting the offered mug. "It's quite remarkable, really." Jake grinned, taking the sip from his own mug. "You ain't seen nothing yet, my alien amigo. The galaxy's about to get a whole lot more interesting." As if on cue, a group of Zorlacs floated by, engaged in an animated discussion about the latest Earth music genre they had discovered, death metal. One of them was awkwardly headbanging, its tentacles flailing in a manner that was both comical and slightly concerning. "See what I mean?" Jake chuckled. "Cultural exchange at its finest." Zixlor nodded, his antennae twitching in amusement. "Indeed. Though I must admit, I'm a bit concerned about the upcoming Intergalactic Food Festival. The last time humans introduced a new Earth cuisine, 3 Grizzlocks had to be treated for spice-induced hallucinations. Ah, they just couldn't handle the jalapeno poppers," Jake waved dismissively. "Don't worry, we're labeling everything with universal spice ratings this time." As they continued their stroll through the station, Zixlor marveled at the changes around them. The once sterile corridors now sported colorful murals, a collaborative art project between humans and various alien species. The central atrium had been transformed into a lush garden, with plants from 100 worlds coexisting in a carefully maintained ecosystem. But it wasn't just the physical changes that struck Zixlor. There was a new spirit of cooperation and innovation permeating every aspect of life on the station. In the science labs, human researchers worked alongside alien counterparts, their unorthodox approaches leading to breakthroughs in fields from quantum mechanics to xenobiology. The diplomatic corps, once a bastion of rigid protocol, had adopted a more flexible approach inspired by human negotiation tactics. It wasn't uncommon now to see serious treaty discussions interspersed with rounds of icebreaker games or even the occasional karaoke session. "Ambassador Zixlor," a voice called out. They turned to see Dr. Xilka, the station's head of xenomedicine, hurrying towards them. The Aldebaran's usually stoic features were animated with excitement. "You won't believe what we've discovered," Dr. Xilka exclaimed. "Remember that rave stabilization technique the humans accidentally invented? Well, we've been studying it, and it turns out it has applications in cellular regeneration. We might be on the verge of a universal healing technology." Jake beamed. "See, I told you our parties were good for something besides hangovers." As Dr. Xilka launched into a detailed explanation that went well over Zixlor's head, the ambassador found himself marveling once again at the unpredictable nature of human influence. What had started as a diplomatic crisis had led to potentially galaxy-changing medical breakthroughs. Their impromptu meeting was interrupted by the station's eye. "Attention all personnel. The first trial run of the Intergalactic Culinary Exchange Program is about to commence in Mess Hall 3. All participants are reminded to keep their environmental suits handy, just in case." Jake's eyes lit up. "Ooh, I wouldn't miss this for the world." "Coming, Zix." As they made their way to the mess hall, narrowly avoiding a group of silicoids attempting to master the art of crowd surfing, Zixlor reflected on the new reality of his role as an ambassador. The arrival of humans had fundamentally altered the dynamics of galactic diplomacy. The old ways of careful negotiation and measured responses seemed quaint in the face of humanity's brash, innovative approach. And yet, somehow, it was working. Species that had been at odds for millennia were finding common ground over shared experiences, be it the thrill of human sports, the puzzle of Earth idioms, or the universal challenge of digesting Terran cuisine. The mess hall was a cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells when they arrived. Beings from across the galaxy mingled, sampling dishes that defied description. In one corner, a human chef was demonstrating the art of pizza, tossing to a captivated audience of Gasians who were attempting to replicate the motion with their own nebulous forms. "Ambassador Zixlor," a voice boomed. A Grizzlock lumbered over, its massive form incongruously adorned with a frilly apron. You must try my latest creation. I call it Sushilo. It's a fusion of Earth sushi and traditional Grizzlock cave moss. It's to die for. As Zixlor cautiously accepted the offered morsel, trying not to think too hard about the to die for idiom, he caught Jake's eye. The human winked, raising his glass in a silent toast. In that moment, surrounded by the beautiful chaos of interspecies mingling, Zixlor felt a profound sense of hope for the future. The galaxy was changing, evolving into something new and exciting, and humanity, with all its contradictions and complexities, was at the heart of that change. Yes, there would be challenges ahead. Cultural misunderstandings, diplomatic faux pas, and the occasional inadvertent offense were inevitable. But there would also be innovation, cooperation, and a shared sense of adventure that transcended the boundaries of species and worlds. As he watched a Prismarian attempt to explain the concept of a food fight to a horrified Vexillian diplomat, Zixlor couldn't help but chuckle. The new galactic era might be chaotic, unpredictable, and more than a little absurd at times, but it would certainly never be boring. To the future, Zixlor said, raising his glass to Jake. To the future, Jake echoed, grinning widely. May it be as weird and wonderful as we can make it. And as the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the occasional explosion from the experimental cooking station filled the air, Zixlor knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and the universe would never be the same again. The adventure was only just beginning.